What?
Why are you shaking your head?
You're welcome.
Graham, you're muted.
Oh no!
Got him.
Mute. We're off to a hot start, man.
Yes,
Well,
dude. The muted
we're off to a
intro.
hot start with a mute. Welcome back and welcome to the Week 9 Cashing Points show. Thanks so much for checking us out as you guys do every single week. Joined by Jake Tribbey and Hilo, aka Mark Garcia of OWS Lore. Fun slate. We were just talking behind the scenes. We got some value between the backs now. DraftKings is a little tight this week, but between Tyrone Tracy week, it is a good week 9. Let's get into it. Let's get right into it here, boys. Chargers and the Browns. Jameis week was a lot of fun. I missed the show last week, but you guys absolutely nailed that call. Hilo, I'll kick it to you. What are your thoughts for this layout? Obviously, completely different spot against the Chargers. They got Joey Bosa back last week. Pass rush came to life. What do you think of Jameis and the Browns this week?
Guys, last week wasn't Jameis week. It is Jameis season.
Let's go.
That should tell you a little bit about where I stand here. I'll break it down a little bit how I'm seeing this spot. And I'll do it like structurally with the offense of the Browns. We'll start there and then I'll stop talking. But right now, we saw in week 7, we saw Cedric Tillman's role grow exponentially. He was the featured player in the offense. They were looking to do things to like structurally to create mismatches for him. They were doing layered routes. They were doing high lows. They were doing all kinds of interesting stuff to get Cedric Tillman in space. In week 8, with now Jameis Winston at quarterback, that switched a little bit. So now Cedric Tillman is doing the high portions of the high lows, and it's Elijah Moore that is working the underneath areas of high lows. So they're still doing a lot of the same stuff, but the structure of the offense has fundamentally changed a little bit, which is kind of cool because Elijah Moore's ADOT grew to 9.6 in week 8. So he's no longer just like a within 5 yards of line of scrimmage guy. And they're looking to create some mismatches with Elijah Moore. And what that has effectively meant is the top 3 pass catchers in the offense, who we thought was going to be Cedric Tillman, David Njoku, and Jerry Jeudy, is actually like Cedric Tillman, David Njoku, and Elijah Moore. Like Jerry Jeudy just continues to not be able to earn targets, whether it's his role or whatever the case may be. Like we've had long enough with the Jerry Jeudy experience to know that this guy just cannot earn targets, right? So now that David Njoku is priced up on both sites, he's 5,100, I think, or 5,500 now on DraftKings, and a little, I forget his FanDuel price, but those 2 wide receivers, those 2 primary guys in Cedric Tillman and Elijah Moore are just so fundamentally underpriced relative to their role in this offense. Yep. Instead of saying like they both project well, I'm going to pick between them. Like it's like throw Jameis at me, man. Like give me some Jameis with them. So I'll continue playing. And a lot of that is like, yes, the Chargers rank first in the league in points allowed per game at 13 points per game. But like, who have they played?
Yeah.
They haven't really played anybody. Like in week 1, who did they play? They played Gardner Minshew and the Raiders. Week 2, it was the Panthers with Bryce Young under quarterback. Week 3, Justin Fields led Steelers. Week 4, this new version of the Kansas City Chiefs. Week 6, after their bye, they play another team with a rookie quarterback in the Denver Broncos and Bo Nix. Week 7 was Kyler Murray and the dysfunctional Arizona Cardinals passing game. And then week 8 was the Derek Carr-less Saints. So yeah, like they haven't allowed a lot of points. They're doing great at point suppression. But I have to think now that the Chargers are actually like a positive pass rate over expectation team since their week 5 bye week, I have to think that we're going to see 70, 75 offensive plays total run from scrimmage. And that's another clear path to 40 plus pass attempts for Jameis Winston.
Yeah.
So I'm buying, man.
Yeah, I don't bet totals. 42.5 is too low. I love the call out for Chargers pass rate coming up. Herbert's just healthier now. That's huge. He spent all of August not being able to practice, not really doing anything in training camp. Then he hurt his ankle. Just huge for him. And I'm with you, man. I ran out Jameis with Tillman and Njoku. I like running out doubles again this week. I think my favorite, though, is the way you just kind of laid it out. Winston, Tillman, and more. I really wish Scott were on this show just for nothing else but to gloat. Jake, he's been the Elijah Moore stand. That was legitimately the best game he's put on tape. And 8 for 85. Like Hilo just said, he's 4,200. You have any other different takes about the Browns? And let's talk through Chargers, Jake. Vlad McConkey's, man, just the price has not come up on him.
Yeah, I mean, McConkey has an awesome matchup here, a fantastic cornerback matchup per our tools, a great schematic matchup, as Ryan Heath highlighted. He's a fantastic player. Hilo already noted that the Chargers' pass game volume is ticking up, and that's really all we were looking for with McConkey. Sure, all his per route metrics were awesome, but you really can't rely on a guy when, a team has a bottom 5 pass rate like Los Angeles did before their bye. Since the bye, Justin Herbert is 3rd in quarterback pass attempts. So yeah, this is a really great spot for McConkey. I think he's the most obvious run back here. You could also argue for J.K. Dobbins, 73% snap share, 56 carries, 17.1 expected fantasy points per game over the last 3 weeks. Those are all top 8 numbers. To me, he kind of feels like a slightly worse version of Derrick Henry. The schedule adjusted matchup isn't great. But yeah, as a part of game stacks, I certainly think it's viable here. This is a really sneaky game and one that I'm really excited to, dive into for my DFS tournament lineups.
Yeah, it's a potentially fun one, especially with Herbert playing better too. Just really fun game. We were talking with Chris this morning, Jake, you and I were, about QJ. Quentin Johnson's going to be back this week off the injury report. It does kind of murk the waters, I guess, a little bit here, Mark. I want to get your thoughts on that and your thoughts on Chargers here.
Yeah, so I was actually just talking offline about Lad McConkey, and this is a guy with an 8.9 ADOT, but more importantly, the structure of his routes and what he means to this offense are not conducive to like per touch upside. He's running a lot of mismatch over the middle of the field to take advantage of his speed. I mean, he's a white man that runs 4.39. Like this is good, right?
He's showing out, baby.
Yeah, right. Let's go. But like, in that sense, like he's not being utilized in like upside inducing routes out of the slot, like seams. And typically like what we see a lot of tight ends run out of the slot, which is seams and slant and goes and things that are designed to create that mismatch, but with upside with the ball in the hand. His routes are more slants and comebacks and these routes that are like presenting numbers to the quarterback, which are less upside inducing per touch or per target basis. So, it takes a lot to align for Lad McConkey to return a usable GPP score on an 8.9 ADOT within that structure in this offense. So I would wager, as a betting man that I am, I would wager that Lad McConkey is not going to be present on another like GPP winning roster for the rest of the season. And that's just based on like what he does and what he is to this offense. I don't. Whoever wants to take that bet, sure. Throw me. Let's go 5 for charity somewhere. But
I hear you. If you were 6,400, I hear you. But he's still in the mid 5s. There's a receiver I like better, Jacoby Myers, but it's still a decent price, man. 4 or 5 grabs, like a guarantee. But yeah, I definitely hear you. And getting Johnston back in the fold, it definitely feels like they could become like a little bit of a, to steal a word from John Hanson, like a super spreader offense. It's just kind of spreading everything out.
Yeah.
But still kind of expect McConkey to be the first read like 25% of the time at least. All right, we spent enough time in this game here, guys. This is another interesting one because I'm going the opposite way with it. I think this game is way too high with the total. It's Miami and Buffalo. 49.5 the total. Buffalo is favored by 6. Mark, I'll toss it to you first. Man, it's kind of hard to see. Like Buffalo's playing so much too high coverage. They've played against Tyreek Hill 6 times, only allowed him to go over 80 yards once. What speeds this game up? It's Josh Allen for sure on the other side, but for right now, for Miami, I think it has to be Devon Achane. 6,700 is such a good price for him, man. I think he's still massively undervalued, and I don't think the ownership will be there like it was last week, since we have so much value now between Chase Brown, Tyron Tracy. let's talk through Miami first, because I think Buffalo is a little trickier. What are your thoughts on this game here, Mark?
Yeah, so in Tua's 3 starts this season, Devon Achane has target counts of 7, 7, and 8, and he has returned receiving only production that would equate to the wide receiver 8 on a per game basis. So you're effectively getting the wide receiver 8 that plays running back that is also going to see 10 to 12 carries on a standard week. So that role, just not even looking at the name, that role by the numbers only means he's fundamentally underpriced at 6,700. So take that for what it's worth. We could debate about the fact that the Bills are playing much more stout run defense of late since week 4. We could read into any of the numbers, but just from like, because pricing is so tight and because he is so fundamentally underpriced, he has immense value there. And that's kind of just the gist of the story there with Devon Achane. You can take shots on Tyreek Hill. You can take shots on Tua in that structure, but it really starts with Devon Achane here.
Yeah, it's not just like the role you described too. I think he's still got a chance at goal line carries, even though it hasn't been the case the last couple games. It was back in week 1. I think there's just so much upside with this price. I was going to come on here and say he's my favorite running back play of the slate. I think that's kind of easily Chase Brown now, given the price here, Jake. What's your thoughts on Miami? And we'll flip over to Buffalo. We've got 4 quarterbacks up at the top between Daniels, Allen, Hurts, and Jackson. Man, they all project pretty closely.
Yeah, they do. To wrap up the Devon Achane discussion, I think one of the other things that I really love about him this week is that Buffalo's the 3rd softest schedule adjusted receiving matchup for running backs. So yeah, even if they are a bit tougher on the ground, I don't necessarily think it matters because Achane's receiving volume has just been so good. I'm with Hilo. I think you can take shots on Tyreek Hill here. The amount of 2 high Buffalo plays is certainly concerning. They've allowed the league's 3rd lowest ADOT, 7th fewest deep receiving yards per game, on top of ranking as a bottom 4 schedule adjusted matchup for opposing outside wide receivers. So nothing about this matchup screams play Tyreek Hill, but at 7,300, you could obviously justify it. I think there might be a little bit of value with Jonnu Smith here. He saw nearly identical usage to Jalen Waddle last week. Over his last 3 games, he's averaging 7 targets per game, about 60 receiving yards per game. That would rank 3rd and 5th best at the tight end position over the full season. At 3,500, I think there's something there. It's not an amazing tight end slate by any means, so you could go that route. On the Bills side, I can't say I love Josh Allen. I mean, this is the single toughest schedule adjusted matchup for opposing quarterbacks. James Cook might have some juice. Buffalo's favored by 6 points here. He averages 21.2 fantasy points per game in the games the Bills have won by 7 or more points since Joe Brady took over as offensive coordinator. But, I also think there are better running back plays overall. There isn't much on the Bills side that gets me excited, but I'm curious if Hilo disagrees.
No, not really. With the interjection of Amari Cooper into this offense, it's really hard to see volume accumulated anywhere, like on a weekly basis, particularly with the new Joe Brady offense, where we're not expecting them to kind of push the tempo on their own. So yeah, I'm kind of with you. I mean, you could take a shot on Josh Allen plus anyone. Keon Coleman has stepped up of late. They've got, a viable slot wide receiver in Khalil Shakir. But none of these guys are playing a ton of snaps, and none of these guys can be expected for immense volume. So it's kind of just a large field MME type setup for me.
Yep. Yeah, I think I would take a couple shots on Cooper for sure in 150s if you're playing some Allen. I'll just bash my head against the wall and hope this is the 80% route share week. Miami's been changing up their coverages. Last 2 previous games, they were playing a ton of 1 high. If they go back to that, get Cooper some 1-on-1s, that'll be nice. But last week they went back and played a bunch of 2 high. I don't really have much else. I think that pretty much covers the Buffalo side. We'll keep going here with Cowboys and the Falcons. Cowboys on the road in Atlanta. 52 is the total. Falcons are our 3-point favorites. CeeDee Lamb, Jake, feels like one of the players that has, at least at receiver this week, one of the few players that has a true 40 point range of outcome at the top end. CeeDee Lamb, awesome game last week, got the big price bump, but feels like an amazing play. What do you think about Dallas and Atlanta?
Yeah, I mean, I think you have to at least, consider game stacks here, given how high the total is. Obviously, CD Lamb is, a really strong play in this game. The only negative note with CeeDee Lamb is that Atlanta's fairly zone heavy, but I think it's overcome by the fact that Dallas has the second best pass blocking grade in our offensive line defensive line matchups tool. CeeDee Lamb's targets per out run more than doubles when Prescott isn't pressured since the start of last year. He averages 25.2 DraftKings fantasy points per game in games with a total of 47 or higher dating back to last year. He scored over 35 points in 23% of those games. Atlanta's allowing the fourth most fantasy points per game to wide receiver one. So this does really feel like a smash spot for CD. I think, if you assume this game shoots out, obviously you're going to want pieces of Dak here. I don't know if I have any great takes on the Atlanta side. To me, I think I want a mini here, mostly with Bijan and CD. Bijan's value is largely dependent on, the opposing team at least showing up in some capacity. So that's probably my favorite way to play this, because I think there are a few other game stacks that I like a bit more. Curious if you guys have any different takes on this game.
The only other note I wanted to add on CD is yeah, sure, it's not a great schematic matchup, but I mean, last 3 games without Cooks, his targets per route run has gone up by 30%. He's gone back to the 33% target per route run. He was at 23%. I pulled this afternoon. It's just been a huge boost for his volume, taking out Cooks. I just want to play a ton of landmark. What do you think about Atlanta? London, it feels like London's going to be mega chalk, and I don't know if I see a huge ceiling with him.
Yeah, I think every week I talk about the fact that I'm going to be lower than the field on all Atlanta skill position players, and this week is kind of no different. Bijan is probably the best bet. I like the CeeDee Lamb, Bijan Robinson skinny that you mentioned. One thing I will add on CeeDee Lamb is this season feels a lot like the 2023 Dallas Cowboys, where they come out, they're like, "Oh, we're going to be a run-heavy team, and we're gonna mix up our player usage," and then they're like, they get to their bye week, and they're like, "Oh fuck, like we gotta win some football games." You look at the last 2 games. Over the last 2 games, so week 6 before their bye, and then week 8 after their bye, CeeDee Lamb has held a 36.6% target rate. He's been responsible for 41.2% of the team's air yards. He's had a 42% targets per route run rate with 3.31 yards per route run, a 44.1% first read target rate, and 0.78 fantasy points per route run. Like, this is what we grew accustomed to last year, at the end of last year, right? So, yeah, I mean, we have this slate where pricing is extremely tight. We've had some value at the running back position open up, but pricing is still tight. And it becomes really hard to pay $88K or $8,800 for a wide receiver on DraftKings, and then 93, I think, 100 for a wide receiver on FanDuel. So that's going to suppress his ownership. But when the way I like to describe this is salary multipliers are fine before any, the first kick of the first game of the slate kicks off. After that, raw points are all that matters. You need raw points. So if CeeDee Lamb is putting up a 40 burger or 45 points, you're going to need that, or you're not winning anything this week. So he very clearly has a path to that. He proved it last week. Of course, he was not on a main slate. I was just waiting for CeeDee Lamb breakout to come, and it comes not on a main slate. But yeah, I'm playing Lamb. You can tag on Dak to that. I love how you asked me a question about the Falcons and I just rave about the Cowboys here. But,
it's completely fine. It's such a good spot, and you're completely right. Yeah. I mean, he's going to be 12%, 15% at most, probably. I mean,
if you're stacking Dak high-low, do you prefer Ferguson or Jalen Tolbert? Because I think I pretty clearly lean Ferguson. He's done pretty well against zone. He's been about as efficient as CeeDee Lamb against zone by yards per route run this year. You line up with that?
Yeah, and Jalen Tolbert is kind of like the vertical stretcher in this offense. Yeah. He is the Z wide receiver. He's running deep. He's a safety manipulator. And fundamentally, what the Falcons are looking to do is they're looking to force teams short. They play deep safeties. They play a lot of 2 high. They play a lot of cover 4 and a lot of cover 6. Against cover 4 and cover 6, it's actually Jake Ferguson that leads the team in most meaningful metrics over the last 2 seasons. So I like that shout a good bit. I prefer running the double with Ferguson with CeeDee Lamb, but I don't think you need to go there. But if I'm attacking this game environment, it's probably through Dak doubles with Ferguson.
Yeah, Ferguson's fine, but it's kind of a tricky week at tight end. It's kind of a hard week to I don't know. Dak's a decent price too, man. It gets expensive with Lamb in there, but I definitely hear you. I mean, I've been saying for a couple weeks for a season long perspective to buy low on Dak, just because the same layout as last year, man. Like they have a great rest of season schedule too. The rest of the NFC East does as well. We do need to talk Atlanta beyond Bijan. Jake, do you have any thoughts on Drake London beyond? He projects really well and he's probably a little bit underpriced, but not by much.
Yeah, I mean, I think he's a solid value. I don't know that I necessarily see slate breaking upside here. I mean, London's price is the wide receiver 13 since week 2, first in first read targets, second in expected fantasy points, second in fantasy points scored. That's great. But again, I do question the upside a bit. Dallas is an outside funnel, so that, that benefits Darnell Mooney and London. The thing that I'm the most confused on with the Atlanta side is why Ray McLeod is projecting for like 10% ownership across the industry. This guy's Southern Wan'Dale Robinson in a worse role. It makes no sense.
Yeah. And I guess I will add to that, it is notable that both starting cornerbacks are out or game time decision for the Cowboys. And they have Micah Parsons who's already been ruled out. So like, to me, if I'm hunting for upside, and we talk about like, I just got done saying salary multiplier doesn't mean much, but if you look at like what Drake London has done this season, he has hit 3x salary multiplier only once all season at his current salary. So like that doesn't interest me that much. What does interest me is Darnell Mooney with a team leading 12.2 ADOT against a Cowboys defense that lost its best pass rusher and is without both cornerbacks. So we don't expect volume to really settle anywhere at a increased rate for this Falcons team. So I want like per target upside. And to me this week, that is Darnell Mooney. So if I'm stacking up Dak with, running a Dak double, I'll probably bring it back with Mooney.
Yeah, I definitely like that call. And honestly, I think I would put Kyle Pitts as my second favorite play behind Mooney on Atlanta, if only because, Dallas has leaned towards single high this year. Kyle Pitts against single high ranks behind only Justin Jefferson and Brian Thomas Jr. in yards per route run, which is absolutely wild. And, he's looked a bit better the last few weeks, certainly running well. So, I think he's probably the next best upside play on Atlanta after Mooney.
Yeah. The problem with Pitts for me is this offense is based out of 11 personnel. Like we know Zach Robinson is an 11 personnel coach, Sean McVay coaching tree, but they still want to play Charlie Warner because he's a really good blocker. So that has come at the direct expense of Kyle Pitts. And not many people realize that he played just over 50% of the offensive snaps last week when he had his 1.5 touchdown game because the second one.
Yeah.
But
he got lucky, man. He got lucky on that one. I thought he might have fumbled that a la Malachi Corley last night.
Yeah, dude.
I don't know, man. I just think we spent a lot of time talking about this game, and I think Bijan's the best play in Atlanta. Like he's just come back to life.
That's fair.
Dallas run defense stinks. Yeah, Trevon Diggs is out, but he's a playmaking quarterback anyway. He's not really a cover corner. He's looking to make plays on the ball. I don't know if that really changes the Mooney and London projection all that much. I just want to play some Bijan. And Jake, I like your call. The Bijan and Lamb skinny stack makes a ton of sense. All right, fellas, we'll keep it moving here. Saints and Panthers. Saints 7-point road favorites. 43.5 is the total. Jake, I'll toss it to you first. Alvin Kamara is back in play. He's been fine, I guess, with Rattler, but really not on our radar. Back in play here at 7,800. Probably a little bit underpriced relative to the top end of the running back board, especially given his ceiling with Derek Carr. And this is just an awesome spot. So let's talk through here some Saints and Panthers and what you're seeing for this game.
Yeah, I mean, Kamara's had, fantastic usage all year. He projects really, really well across the industry. He's facing the single softest schedule adjusted matchup for opposing running backs on the ground as a 7-point favorite. I mean, it's a near perfect setup. Doesn't look like we'll have Kendre Miller or Jamal Williams in this one either. I do think you could argue, I mean, in cash, obviously you're playing Kamara. You really don't have a choice there, but I do think you could argue maybe in large field GPPs that, Taysom Hill has a decent amount of touchdown equity here. Kamara's only commanded 48% of team red zone carries when Taysom Hill is active compared to 78% when Hill has been out. So, I think that's probably the only negative note you could really throw at Kamara this week. Outside of that, I mean, he's a really strong play.
He is, and so is Chris Olave. I think Olave is just massively underpriced for the role. 41% first read target share, nearly 60% of the air yards last week mark. And I mean, everybody against the Panthers is eating. Cortland Sutton looked freaking awesome last week against the secondary. They're just letting everybody loose. What do you think about the Saints here? And we'll kind of breeze through the Panthers, but I mean, we do need to talk through their value that they might provide. At least there's some of the receivers without Deontay and without Thielen this week.
Yeah, so the Saints, Derek Carr has a season high of 36 pass attempts. His other 4 games was 28 pass attempts, 25, 16, and 23. So this is not I think the Saints team is getting looked at differently than they should by the field. We'll just put it that way. Also, Alvin Kamara saw 2 of his 3 lowest snap rate games in week 7 and week 8. And that's important because those were the only 2 games where Kendre Miller has not had a hamstring injury this season. Now we have Kendre Miller out. We have Jamal Williams listed as doubtful. Alvin Kamara is going to be on the field 88, 90% snap rate. So
they have nobody else, dude.
They have nobody else. And similar to Achane, Alvin Kamara is operating as kind of like the wide receiver 2 in this offense. And he has been since week 4. Like since week 4, he has seen 7 or more targets in every single game. We saw this happen last season when they were dealing with injuries. Kamara had his 2 14 target games. Now it's a lot of the like similarities between those two. So we expect him to be on the field. We expect that they don't really have anybody else because their RB2 and their RB3 are out. And this is like they're against a Panthers team that is allowing a touchdown on 75% of opposing red zone drives. They are allowing the most points in the league. Like it's the perfect matchup. So yeah, I've been toying around with, and I like that Jake brought up the Taysom Hill call because I've been toying around with saying I must have one of Alvin Kamara or Taysom Hill on every roster because the spot is so good. So we don't expect the Saints to quote unquote fail. So if Alvin Kamara fails to put up like a GPP worthy score, it's likely that it's because the touchdowns are flowing elsewhere. Chris Olave, like he keeps looking good on paper. The next time Chris Olave puts up a 4x salary multiplier on his week 9 salary will be the first time in his career. He has not done it. So, and we're talking, he's in year 3 now. So to me, it's like the only way Alvin Kamara fails is if like Taysom Hill poaches 2 or 3 touchdowns. And that is a viable outcome here. So I really like that shout. I'm looking for ways to play one of these 2 guys.
How often do you have a $3,800 tight end with a clear path to 10 touches? I mean, it just almost never happens. You know, the red zone work will be there too. And I don't think I should have mentioned this earlier. Carolina's giving up the most points per game in at least the last 20 years. This is a worse defense than the 2008 Detroit Lions by points per game allowed. I mean, it's insane, the numbers they're giving up.
I really want Taysom Hill to be the first player in a long time to throw 1, rush for 1, and receive 1 in a game. Like that would just be so cool.
This would be the game to do it, right?
Yeah.
Oh man. Yeah. That's the baseball equivalent of hitting for the cycle, basically.
Yeah.
Needed to happen now. Just to back up your point, I mean, about Derek Carr and the pass rate here. I mean, their first 3 games he was healthy. They were the most run heavy team in the league, like more run heavy than the Chargers, more run heavy than the Ravens. So I mean, it's going to be a ton of Kamara. And you guys have gotten me excited to play some Taysom, especially in tournaments when he's probably going to be 5 or 6%. I think this week it's going to be heavy ownership around Gesicki, Bowers, and probably a little bit of McBride. So really like that call. Panthers side, we do need to talk through real quick. I mean, I'm not excited to talk about it. Any interest at all in some of these value guys? Coker is going to be playing in the slot. It's a great matchup. Saints have been the worst defense against slot receivers this year by yards per route run allowed. McConkey just shredded them. I mean, Coker looked good on tape last week, but I don't see a whole lot of upside here with Bryce Young. Any thoughts? No John Brooks this week. He's not going to be elevated. They're going to have to elevate him, I think, Monday or Tuesday next week. So
Wednesday's the deadline.
Yeah, damn, dude. I think he might have had a setback. We'll never know. Anybody have any thoughts on the Panthers here?
Jalen Coker is a fine value. I mean, he's top 20 in first downs per route run, which is insane for an undrafted wide receiver out of Holy Cross. You know, it's a top 7 schedule adjusted matchup. I mean, Graham, you already noted the slot matchup's really strong here. They're 7-point underdogs. They're going to have to throw a ton against, you know, the league's second biggest pass funnel. He's a He's a fine punt. You know, in my MME sets and like a 150 set, I doubt I want more than 5 to 8%. He's fine. That's just how I feel about him.
Yeah, Chuba was fun while it lasted, but the splits with him and Bryce Young are not great. Just this offense is so much worse. It is a good spot. He'll get a ton of touches, but 6,500 now. Prices come way up. This is the most expensive or second most expensive he's been all year, I guess. Not super stoked about that. All right, we'll keep moving here in Titans and Patriots. Let's go. It is Julius Chestnut week. Hilo, you were pointing out a couple weeks
ago. I was
ago
3 weeks early, man.
Yeah, look at that. Hey, man, he's stone men. Tony Pollard hasn't practiced all week. Tyjae Spears has already been ruled out. This game environment is atrocious, but he's stone men. What do we think about the spot?
I'm actually going to go to the other running back here.
Okay.
Let's look at Ramondre Stevenson real quick. Ramondre Stevenson, well, effectively, the Patriots have played 4 games in which they did not get waxed. It came in week 1 where they beat the Bengals 16-10. It came in week 2 where they lost by 3 to the Seahawks. It came in week 5 where they lost 15-10 to the Dolphins. And it came in week 8 when they surprised the Jets with a 25-22 victory. In those games, Ramondre Stevenson has 28, 26, 15 or 16, and 23 running back opportunities, and his return DK points of 24.6, 17.0, 19.2, and 23.5. So to me, and this is a spot where like Ramondre Stevenson is a little bit interesting to me. He's not going to be owned. He's priced around guys like DeAndre Swift, who has recorded 20 or more DK points in 4 consecutive games. So he's not going to garner a lot of ownership. But if we get Will Levis back for the for the Titans, he's listed as questionable. We get the opportunity for the Patriots defense, who has not done a lot this year, to actually do something to keep their team in the game. And if that is the case, and if the Titans are on their 3rd string running back, who's a former undrafted free agent special teamer, if all those things like align, like this is a spot where Ramondre Stevenson could see 25 plus running back opportunities. And the way to attack the Titans is very clearly on the ground. So he does have like 102 upside in here. I would like him more if Drake May clears concussion protocol and is active.
What I was just about to say. I'm not stoked about a Jacoby Brissett-led offense. If it's May, hell yeah, I'm playing some Ramondre because he's back. He got the route share back up last week to I think it was up to 55%. JaMychal Hasty was weirdly playing a ton last 2 weeks, but I mean it was great to see. Fully great to see the passing down stuff fully back. Yeah, man. This game is so gross. Calvin Ridley might be out on this one too. He hasn't practiced, I don't think, all week. Jake, talk us through Titans. And is it Julius Chestnut week? Are we excited about Julius Chestnut? Don't ever pull up his mock draftable or combine metrics. Don't do
that. He's big. He's a bowling ball. That's all you need to know.
Yeah. I should note Ridley's actually off the injury report here.
Oh, is he? Okay, good.
I think he's a decent play. He projects as a top 10 value with us, assuming Mason Rudolph plays. Rudolph has been more efficient than Levis. He's throwing more. Game environment's so bad that, I am a little bit concerned about the overall volume. Outside of that, the tricky thing with Chestnut is I'm worried Joshua Kelly could work in too. And if Joshua Kelly steals 35 or 40% of the snaps, what are we doing with even a min price Julius Chestnut and, what could be argued as the worst game environment of the year? It's really tough to like anyone on the Titans side.
It is. Thanks for the correction on Ridley. I totally missed that today. Is Joshua Kelly on their active roster or is he on their practice squad?
Practice squad.
Okay, nice.
Yeah.
We'll have to monitor that. They'll definitely have to bring him up or somebody up. I think they have somebody else. I can't remember his name. All right, we'll keep it going. Vegas and Cincinnati, 45.5 total. 7 is the spread. No T. Higgins and Zach Moss is out. He has a neck injury. I think he had a neck issue last year or 2 years ago, if I'm not mistaken. So hopefully he's all right, man. That's a little bit scary. But, man, Chase Brown, holy shit. He's 5,900. I think he's the best running back play on the slate. One of the best running back plays of the season, pound for pound at this price, Jake. it's just a great spot now. I mean, we're going to get fully unleashed bell cow Chase Brown. Like, Hilo is just kind of lining up the role for Kamara. I think that's kind of what we should expect for Chase Brown. I mean, Travion Williams hasn't played all year, and he stinks. Chase Brown is an awesome play. What do you think about this game, man?
Yeah, I mean, starting with Chase Brown, this is a bit of a tricky game for me to decipher, but there are plenty of plays that I like here. Obviously, starting with Chase Brown, no Zach Moss. It's a top 4 schedule adjusted matchup. Travion Williams, 0 offensive snaps, as Graham already hinted at. Chase Brown, pretty great throughout his career at generating explosive plays. So when you combine that with, what is probably going to be an 80% snap share, I'd imagine Travion Williams is only going to come on the field for sort of those empty calorie snaps. Everything important is going to Chase Brown here. That makes for a really awesome workload and profile at 5,900. Beyond him, I mean, you could obviously argue for Jamar Chase in a game where we're not going to have T. Higgins. I think Mike Gesicki is a quality tight end value. 7 targets per game, 60 receiving yards per game, 11.4 fantasy points per game without Higgins. All fantastic marks for a $3,100 tight end. I think my favorite play overall in this game after Brown, though, is Jacoby Myers. Great schematic matchup. Cincinnati's lean towards single high. Myers sees a 29% boost to his targets per out run against single high dating back to last year. 33% first read target share in his games without Devontae Adams. That would rank top 12 over the full season. It's also ahead of Brock Bowers. He's a strong play. 5,300, top 7 schedule adjusted matchup. Myers is looking really nice this week.
Yeah, I like him more than McConkey, just straight up. I think he's one of my favorite plays of the slate. And I wanted to talk a little bit about Gesicki, Mark. Kind of just feels like he's the cash tight end this week. 3,100 is just such a cheap price for this role. I mean, 21% target share. I mean, it's Mike Gesicki. He could pull the rug out on us quickly, but it's a good spot too. Burrow's playing pretty well. The role's been good. You got any different thoughts here on this game? Any angles that we're missing?
Yeah, no. Just to back up the Gesicki play a little bit, he has seen a deeper ADOT than Jamar Chase in the games played without T. Higgins this season. That's what? That's crazy.
That's Zach Taylor, baby.
Yeah. So we talked about like the mismatches being able to be generated by tight ends. He is running those seams, those slant goes, those trying to get him on like linebackers and safeties and slot corners. He is doing that. The problem is his route participation rate is suboptimal. We'll say he's not in a route at a clip that we would love. And the Bengals are adopting much more reserved play without T. Higgins this season. Jamar Chase is not being utilized. His ADOT has suffered like a 40% hit in games without T. Higgins. They're looking to march the field. And when you remove that like downfield element of an offense, it doesn't just mean that like, oh, they're not going to be throwing deep. It means that like safeties can creep up into the box at a heavier rate. It means that they can like play against the run. So that isn't to say like I don't love Chase Brown. He is very clearly like the top value play on the slate. It's just something to keep in mind. Counterbalancing that is this idea that like Chase Brown still is not being trusted with pass blocking reps. The other side of that coin is the Raiders are generating pressure at the second lowest rate in the league. So that doesn't mean as much. Like even if we're looking at like a league average pressure rate team, like the Commanders, for example, they're right around league average. If they were playing someone like that, we would have a little bit more pause, or I would caution a little bit more on Chase Brown. But the fact that like this Raiders team is just so atrocious and scheduled adjusted fantasy points allowed to running back, the fact that they are not generating pressure, I would expect Chase Brown to be in a route at a higher rate. So he's seen 3 targets or more in all but 2 games playing alongside Zach Moss. So I would say he has a floor of 4 or 5 targets here, probably a floor of 15 to 18 carries, and that level of volume in this spot is like tough to pass up.
Yeah, 2 things. I don't think the Raiders keep this game close, but if they were to, I think Brown has a massive ceiling in terms of the pass production. You look at Moss, I mean, he's got 3 or more receptions in 5 of his last 6 games. Yeah, he's playing a ton because of the pass pro stuff, but like clearing out 45% of the routes for Brown is just huge. I mean, Trevion's not going to play. I was going to mention it with the Saints game. Like I really want to play Taysom with Saints D. I think that's a way to get weird. I really want to play Bengals defense, but they're both so damn expensive. I'd love to play some Chase Brown with Bengals D, but 3,700s, it's hard to get there. Maybe a little easier on this slate with some cheaper options. Beyond Bowers, beyond Myers, I got nothing else from Raiders side. I mean, that's really about it. They've been super condensed, which is great for us, but not a great offense. We'll keep it going here. Broncos and Ravens, 46.5 the total. Ravens huge favorites at home, 9.5 point favorites. Just in good get right spot. But Broncos defense has been chippy. Hilo, you were kind of lining up earlier with the Chargers, right? Like, who have they really played? Like maybe one good quarterback in Kyler, and I think you can kind of say the same thing with Denver. They've really not played any good quarterbacks all year. Now, I don't want to take anything away from their defense. They're sick. Like blitz a ton. Super confusing in the back end. Pat Surtain's balling out. They can do some really fun stuff, just kind of isolating him and just letting him take out receivers. Still, this is their biggest test, man. Lamar on the road. Lamar off the injury report. He's good to go. Mark, walk us through this spot.
Yeah, and I think that's the difference, though, between the Chargers and the Broncos, and you nailed it, is the fact that they're mixing up things enough to be so unpredictable. They're able to go isolation. They just throw. They're able to throw island at like from man coverage. They're able to play a lot from zone. They're able to, I mean, they lead the league in blitz rate. They're able to just do all these cool, unique stuff with the personnel that they have and the defensive minds that they have. That it makes the way that I've related this in the past is it makes their opponents play more street ball. They're like constantly on their heels, playing backup. They're reacting instead of being able to come in with this like unique game plan specific to this opponent. How are we going to exploit them? It's like, yo, we're on our back foot and we got to go figure this out.
Bro, you know who the best street ball quarterback of all time is? It's Lamar Jackson, probably.
I was going to say Mike Vick, but yeah, that's pretty good. Yeah. Okay. It's same, right?
Yeah, Vic probably has a little better quickness but
yeah. So this is a really tough game for me to iron out. Like, how do the Ravens incorporate Deontay Johnson? We know that Rashad Bateman has been like the deep guy. Are they going to structurally alter their offense after like signing Deontay Johnson? Are they going to lower their 12 and 21 personnel rates? Like, that signing made very little sense to me. I don't know where he fits into this offense, and I don't know how they're going to use him. So yeah, just like all the uncertainty here kind of just makes me say, like, I can find places with less uncertainty. And if you want to go here, I would prefer to like attack the game environment as a whole and just say, like, I'm going to base things around Lamar Jackson, pair him with Derrick Henry, maybe play him with whoever you want. I mean, like, just it's tough to nail down the volume. So we just say, like, I'm going to place my bet on the Ravens succeeding, and that will then in turn force Denver to be aggressive. And I would probably bring it back with Cortland Sutton.
Yeah. Oh my! I mean, it's such a good spot for Sutton. Every receiver is going off, and the game against the Saints seems like a one blip on the radar. By expected fantasy points, first target share, like he was like a borderline-ish wide receiver one on those volume. Just needed the catchable targets to come up. I was just pulling up Lamar Jackson's stats against the blitz this year. Sixth best by passer rating, third best, well, tied for third best with Geno against the blitz, completion rate over expectation, and he's not scrambling. He's hanging in the pocket. There's like, a couple more quarterbacks have more scrambles, higher scramble rate. So Lamar playing really well against the blitz. This is going to be a great game. Beyond that, Jake, do you have any other thoughts on Broncos side? Because I think it's Lamar, Henry, and if you want to play some Flowers. But actually, real quick, Hilo, I wanted to ask you, what do you think they do with Surtain this week? Do they shadow him with Flowers, or do they leave him on a side? What's your read on that?
I would think, and I've thought a lot about this as well. Looking at their tape and looking at their defensive tendencies, I would think they just play sides.
Yeah, I think so. I mentioned this morning. I was thinking about this morning because I was like, man, they might travel Flowers with them, but the way they use Flowers, it doesn't really make sense.
Yeah. He's typically he's not like even like a Marshawn Lattimore, like an X remover, but he's typically like a guy that they want to get a body on. And it's really hard to do that on these twitchier wide receivers. So like if Deontay Johnson joined the team like 4 weeks ago and we kind of knew what his role would be, he would be more in line of like a guy that we would expect. We would expect to see a shadow, but yeah, we don't expect him to be like on Rashad Bateman, Zay Flowers. They're not going to throw him in the slot or tight end. So yeah, I think they just play sides here.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. And it will especially make sense if they do mix in Deontay and Aguilar. Thomas, Thomas Tipple, producer Thomas, and Dynasty Points Thomas, and Ravens fan Thomas, super sharp call last week saying that they were going to lose to the Browns. Thomas was telling me that he thinks that they're just going to replace Deontay with Aguilar. And I think that makes sense. Bateman can stretch the field still, but it's going to impact his route share no matter what. Jake, any other thoughts here on this game? No one's going to play Henry, it seems like.
Yeah, no one wants to play Henry. I mean, Baltimore's favored by, I think the spread's down to 8. It's reasonable to expect Henry to land much closer to the 22.9 fantasy points per game he's averaged in wins since 2018. I think that's a way to get a little bit different this week, is to just jam a guy like Henry in and maybe ignore, a CeeDee Lamb or some of the other more expensive options that are drawing a bit more ownership here. Obviously no interest in Javonte Williams given the projected game script, but I did want to mention Bo Nix. I don't really think he's a dramatically worse play than he was last week when he was chalk. The matchup's really strong. Baltimore's the second softest schedule adjusted matchup for opposing quarterbacks through the air. Should be a pass heavy script here. He has a pretty solid rushing floor. He's only averaging 1.5 rushing fantasy points per game, less than Lamar Jackson. I'm not super excited about it, but in a 150 set, he's a guy I'd probably throw out there in a few teams.
Yeah, prices come up, but it is a good spot. Geno's ownership is going to come down. I think Nix's ownership is going to come up with no Metcalf.
That's fair.
Good call. All right, that'll cover this game. Washington and New York, final game of the 1 p.m. set. Washington 4-point favorites, totals 44.5. Man, it's Tyrone Tracy week. I think Chase Brown projects better. Devin Singletary, you get a few carries, but Jake, he's 5,500. He's already gone over 100 yards twice in his last 4 games. And this is a great matchup, man. I mean, it really comes down to how much faith do we have in Daniel Jones to keep this game really close. And I got to say, at this point, I don't think I have too much. Kind of close to seeing Drew Lock, but man, it is just such a good spot and such a cheap price for Tyrone Tracy here.
Yeah, I think you hinted at, the big difference between Tracy and Chase Brown is just the overall offensive environment. Still, he had, 20 of 22 backfield rushes last week. He ranks top 12 in every running back efficiency metric that matters. But, as Graham hinted, implied total here is, I believe, the 6th lowest on the slate for the New York Giants. This is also the 4th least valuable backfield by fantasy points per game. At 5,500, you could pretty much write those concerns off, at least when it comes to overall value. It does make me question the upside a bit if the offensive environment isn't great here. And Washington's defense, Hilo had a really sharp call on this last week. Washington's defense is notably improved. I mean, Daniel Jones is projecting for more ownership than I really thought he would, considering Washington is I know it's really weird. Since week 4, Washington's the single toughest schedule adjusted matchup for opposing quarterbacks. So I don't expect them to hold that for the rest of the year, but this is definitely a lot tougher matchup than the field is giving Washington credit for.
Yeah, the Commanders rank 4th in EPA per play allowed since week 4. This is not the same team that was just getting shredded to open the season. The other side of that is the Commanders have still been attackable on the ground. They're allowing the 2nd most yards before contact per attempt, and Tyrone Tracy has been legit good. He's averaging 5.2 yards per carry, 3.01 yards after contact per attempt. And since he took over the lead back role in week 5, he ranks 13th in fantasy points per game. He's averaged 86.75 yards per game, and he's forced the 4th most missed tackles behind only Bijan Robinson, Josh Jacobs, and Najee Harris. The hell? So yeah, this is an interesting spot for Tracy. He's going to have to hit the 100-yard bonus and score in order to return a GPP viable score, just because he doesn't necessarily see the requisite pass game involvement to really remove the need for multiple or to find the end zone. So there are more paths to failure, I think, than someone like Chase Brown, but that does not mean that he's not one of the top value plays on the slate.
Yeah, I mean, he just put a stamp on this backfield last week. I mean, there's no going back to the Devin Singletary thing.
Over.
I don't think. Yeah, it's very, very over. I will say, just Washington, yeah, they're playing a little better defense, but you look at their schedule, right? They got shredded by Baker, shredded by Burrow. Kyler wasn't playing well. They played Deshaun Watson. They played Andy Dalton. Caleb Williams played awful last week, and the Bears were the most run-heavy team in the league last week. I don't know. They're playing better for sure, but I think they're gettable. Not saying I'm playing Daniel Jones. I'm certainly not, but we'll see. Washington, man, I think it's Jaden Daniels and McLaurin. That price is just coming up and up and up, though. It's getting more and more expensive, but McLaurin at sub 5% ownership, Jake, is pretty interesting to me, I think, in this spot. Any other thoughts on Washington beyond Daniels, McLaurin? Any interest in B-Rob?
A little bit. I think they're overall better running back spots. Not a guy I'm going to X out of my pool or anything, but yeah, not a guy I'm particularly excited to play. Ryan Heath had a really interesting note on Jaden Daniels that his deep throw rate massively increases when he's scrambling, when he's under pressure. I should say he scrambles a lot more when he's under pressure. Deep throw rate increases significantly when he does scramble. That's obviously a great note for Terry McLaurin, considering the Giants bring the fourth most pressure in the NFL. I still can't quite decide what I want to do with Daniels. Obviously, like I noted, the pressure rate's great for his scrambling. It's probably great for his rushing, but his 3 best fantasy games this season have come in his 3 lowest pressure rate games on the year. So, Hilo, I'm really curious what your thoughts are on Jaden Daniels and this Washington offense overall.
It's kind of the same story that we've talked a lot about in this space throughout the season. Jaden Daniels, like this Washington offense just wants to march the field, time of possession, and now they have a defense playing to a level where they can do that at an even greater rate. They're mixing in downfield passing at an increased rate after they very clearly opened the season and were like, oh yeah, we should attack downfield. So all that to say, Terry McLaurin is a guy that is hard for me to bet on him seeing more than 6 to 8 targets. So can he return GPP viability at what's his price now? 7,200? Yeah, 7,100 on DraftKings. Now we're in Puka Nacua is 100 more than him. Cooper Kupp is 600 more than him. These are just guys I would much rather play in a vacuum because can Terry McLaurin score 2 deep touchdowns? Yeah, he can in this spot. This Giants secondary is missing Cordell Flott. They benched Deontay Banks last week mid-game because he was getting shredded. He can. It's not the likeliest scenario. So it's a GPP only play for me. I would prefer to play him with Jaden Daniels because this Giants defense is able to generate pressure. We could see a higher scramble rate. So we could see a 10 to 12 carry opportunity or carry game from Jaden Daniels. So when you mix in, if McLaurin hits, that means he's scoring deep touchdowns. And if he does that, now you add that to the rushing production. So yeah, I'd prefer to play him with Jaden Daniels. But I don't think you have to go here. It's more of a large field GPP only play for me.
Yeah, it is. And that's the way I'm looking at it too. I do think McLaurin has, even though you're right, yeah, he's not going to have a 12 target game. He has definitely GPP winning upside, I think, in this spot. Jaden's playing exceptionally well. If I'm paying up for quarterback this week, though, I want to make it Jalen Hurts. Let's talk Jags, Eagles. Totals 45.5. Eagles 7.5 point favorites. I mean, this has just been the absolute best matchup possible for opposing quarterbacks. Jags are doing their thing again where they play a ton of man coverage. They've been at 40% or higher man coverage rate in the last 2 games with Tyson Campbell back. And A.J. Brown might be the best receiver in the NFL against man coverage right now. Dude's just unguardable. Hilo, I'll toss it to you first for your thoughts here on Eagles, Jags, and walk me through what you're seeing with Eagles. I mean, these guys are expensive, man. Hurts is expensive. Barkley, A.J. Brown, they're all expensive, but it is an absolute huge spot possibly.
Yeah, this is probably the biggest catch-22 on the slate because you have an Eagles defense that leads the league in rush rate over expectations since their week 5 bye. And you have a very clear pass funnel matchup against the Jaguars playing a ton of man coverage. We talked about it in the space. The Jaguars started the season with borderline ridiculous man coverage rates.
No, it's still ridiculous. They have no business playing this much man.
They don't, but it was when they had the injuries in the secondary, they shifted to heavier rates of zone. And then they came out and they've been right around like 40 to 45% man coverage over the last 2 weeks with the Tyson Campbell back and the players that were missing. So how do they approach it? How does Nick Sirianni and how do the Eagles approach this spot? I don't know. So that just introduces a wide range of outcomes. So I think at lower ownership, we can attack these spots. Jalen Hurts not expected to garner a lot of ownership. AJ Brown definitely not. And so if these are the spots where wide range of outcomes means they could put up relative stinkers, they could put up scores that you had to have or you were not winning the slate. And those are the spots that I like to bet on when they're low owned because they still have some of the highest upside on the slate. And the uncertainties in that come from, we don't really know how they're going to attack this spot because their established tendencies don't align with the matchup. So I'm fine buying in the pass game here.
Yeah, I really like it for tournaments. Obviously, the inverse of that is just to jam in Barkley and play some Eagles defense and just say, hey, the Jags are going to get just steamrolled here, which certainly could happen. But Jake, if there were ever a spot for the Eagles to not have a negative 10% P-row, it would be this spot, right? What are your thoughts on this game? And talk through Jags side because, man, Evan Ingram's just kind of staring me in the face at 5,300 on DraftKings.
Yeah, I mean, I'm with you. The matchup for Philadelphia certainly lends itself to a more pass-heavy approach, but this is also a team that's running the ball 65% of the time when they're up by 7 or more points, and we can probably expect them to get up here. Barkley's always a tricky play because he could go for 150 yards, and if he gets tackled inside the 2-3 times, he's not going to score. It's tough. Evan Ingram, though, I mean, he's a really, really strong play this week. In his 5 games without Christian Kirk last season, he averaged 18.7 fantasy points per game. That would have ranked 6th among wide receivers, and it would have been 5 fantasy points per game more than last year's tight end 1. It's a bottom 5 on paper matchup, but to me, he's right there as the best tight end play of the slate. Yeah, this is a really, really strong spot for Evan Ingram. You could also argue for Parker Washington if Gabe or Brian Thomas Jr. sit, but it's pretty gross. I mean, Scott Barrett described him as a poor man's Jahan Dotson, and I think that's about right.
Jahan Dotson's run like 200 routes this year, and he's been targeted, I think, 9 times. It's pretty brutal. Yeah, Evan Ingram has been the first read or tied for the being the first read at the highest rate on the team in 4 out of 4 games this year. And now you remove Christian Kirk from the equation. It's Ingram printers are going to go burr. He's going to come way up in price. Man, I really like that play. Anything else from Jags side? I mean, we're just taking out Bigsby and ETN. Those two are going to form some sort of compartmentalized split with ETN on passing downs. I don't think I have much else from Jags side, Hilo.
Yeah, not really anything to add.
Okay. We're waiting on Brian Thomas Jr., waiting on Gabe Davis. Those guys are game time decisions. We'll keep it going here to Bears and Cardinals, 44.5 total. Cardinals 1.5 point home favorites. Kyler played his best game of the year last week. Mark, you have been right with me on the way this offense is structured. What did you see last week? It was nice to see Marv kind of get some more of the horizontal, crossing route stuff, get him in space and, kind of get him running horizontally against defenders so he can stretch out and run. Still no design targets last week, but it was nice to see a little bit of a change. The only thing that's been consistent in this offense has been McBride. So getting Harrison layered in is nice to see. What do you think about Kyler? What do you think about this game here?
Yeah, apparently Kyler met with Marvin Harrison Jr. before last week and was like, "Hey, dude, what kind of route structure are you most comfortable with? What do you want to run?" And then they took that to Drew Petzing, and he's like, "Hey, let's run a little bit more of these slants and some of these crossers." It's like, "Oh yeah, that's a good idea, dude." Like, obviously, come on, man. He was like 80% of his routes through like the weeks of week 4 through week 7 were like go routes. Like, what are we doing here, man? So yeah, that is good to see. I still like Drew Petzing is a monkey calling passing plays.
Okay, hear me out though. Hear me out. He's an awesome run game coordinator, like top 3 run game coordinator. What if we finally get some consistency out of this passing offense? Like, this could seriously turn into one of the better offenses in the league. I think if we actually get consistency here from Kyler, who's played better last week, and this kind of new-ish role for Marv.
That's what it needs. That's what this offense needs to turn the corner. You're like, yeah, their run game scheme, I agree, is like a top 3 run game scheme. The problem is I have been burned so often in the past by the assumption of rational coaching, which like we can't put ourselves in their shoes and be like, yeah, this is what you should be doing. Like X's and O's, here you go.
Bro, I'm trying to talk you into Kyler, and I'm trying to talk myself into Kyler, but yeah, I know. He's 6,600. It's a tough on paper matchup. Chicago's kind of one of those weird defenses too. They haven't played a ton of good defenses, but Jalen Johnson's playing freaking awesome.
Yeah,
it is a tough matchup for Marv. They play a lot of one high, so it's kind of the same schematic matchup as last week a little bit, but yeah, it's a tougher matchup with Jalen Johnson there. Jake, you got any thoughts here on Cardinals side to add and walk us through Bears? I mean, these receivers are just cannibalizing each other, but DeAndre Swift's definitely in play again this week.
Yeah, I was really hoping Hilo would be a little bit more excited about the Cardinals passing game.
Yeah.
So I was ready to be talked into it as well, but just not quite there. I do want to say, I think, the field's probably sleeping a bit on James Conner's role here. 92% of backfield XFP over his last 2 games. There's only 2 players over the full season that are over 80%. I believe he's only lost 3 backfield opportunities over the last 2 weeks. So James Conner is getting absolutely fed here. And that makes him a, fairly interesting play. I'm with you on the Bears receivers. None of them stand out. when we were going through projections this morning, I think we had Keenan Allen, Romo Dunze, and DJ Moore all projected for something between like a 19.5 and 24% target share. It's so condensed. It's really difficult to pick one. Obviously, forced to choose, I'd much rather go with Odunze or more downfield roles, just better players overall, I think, at this point in their careers. The DeAndre Swift role is awesome, but I am a bit worried about game script here. He's only averaged 11 fantasy points per game, 12.5 expected fantasy points per game in the Bears' 3 losses this season, 9 expected fantasy points per game in their loss last week. In wins, that's jumped to 19.1 fantasy points per game, 17 expected fantasy points per game. So his workload, 36% better in games the Bears win. I think the way to play Swift is you just pair him with the Bears defense.
Yeah, great call. Love that call, especially if we go down the rabbit hole of, Cardinals come out with a negative 15% P-row again and try to jam in James Conner, and this game turns into a grind fest. All right, we'll keep it going here. Lions and Packers.
Real quick, I got one more thing on that game. Sorry.
Sure.
A lot of the single high from the Bears comes from cover 3. So they rank 5th in the league in cover 3 utilization at 40.6%. And the Cardinals against cover 3 this season has been effectively only Trey McBride. Trey McBride has seen 32.3% of the overall targets against cover 3 from this offense. His targets per route run is 35%. His first read target rate is 42.5%. And his fantasy points per route run is 0.66. So if anybody's going to succeed, I think it's going to be Trey McBride here. And he's kind of priced up to a point where like we're kind of getting sick of clicking his name because he hasn't really returned like a solid salary multiplier on that price. But if somebody is like on the slate there, I guess the way that I'll frame it is there aren't very many tight ends that can put the slate out of reach, put up a score you had to have, a 30+ point score. Trey McBride is probably one of the few that can.
Can we get him a touchdown? For the love of God.
That he's not falling on in the end zone from a fumble.
Yeah, please. Can we please get this man a touchdown here? Floor's been amazing, but yeah, that's the one thing missing is really honestly Kyler playing better. It was good to see last week. All right, Lions and Packers. Lions 2.5 point favorites, 47.5 the total. Jordan Love will play. This is just a massive game for the NFC. Packers have their bye coming up next week. So they will be off. Love will get some rest. But obviously just huge implications in this spot. I'm not like obviously super stoked to play Love or Goff. But man, Hilo, I think Jaden Reed's price has come down just enough. And this spot is so good at 6,400. He got up into the 7Ks. He's now back in the mix 6s. Kind of a tricky game, but this is a great spot for Reed, especially that Love's in. What are you seeing from this game here?
Yeah, I don't know, man. Those splits just will not go away. Jaden Reed, his splits against man coverage have been so bad this year. And that's dating back to last year as well, I guess. And that's important because the Lions are in cover one at a league high 43.8%. So, or man coverage, I should say, because some of that comes from cover two man. So yeah, man, I don't know. Like, it's Romeo Dobbs, it's Christian Watson. I think the most interesting guy from the Packers in this spot is Christian Watson. His snap rate jumped up to 74% last week. So he's kind of separated himself a little bit from Dontavian Wicks. Like, we talked about it for a while, like while Watson was coming back, they were kind of just sharing a role, kind of both playing this like deep role in this offense. Now it looks like it's swung back into Christian Watson's favor, whether that's like health related reasons, I don't know, but he's kind of taken back that role. So if he's on the field more, if he's running those deep routes against a Lions secondary that has been burned deep at a fairly frequent rate this season, I think he's interesting at a modest price point here.
Yeah, 67% route share last week was a season high for him, but it's still just 67%, you know. So if that's the ceiling, yeah, it's tricky. Jake, what are you seeing from this game, dude?
There isn't a ton that I like here. I mean, like you mentioned, the matchup's great for Jaden Reed. He was at a season low route share last week. I wondered if that had anything to do with maybe Malik Willis coming into the game. Still a bit concerning. Yeah, Romeo Dobbs, I mean, he's led the Packers in target share in back-to-back games. He's probably the only wide receiver we can safely rely on for a full-time route share here. He's a decent value at 5,700. Again, not a guy I'm particularly excited to play. I would be excited about the Lions backfield because, you know, they have the second best run blocking grade in our tools this week. Jahmyr Gibbs is 7,600 though. And that's, I mean, you just can't justify that price for a guy who's looking at 55% of backfield expected fantasy points as like a ceiling.
Yeah. And David Montgomery could easily score 2 touchdowns. It's just, I can't get there with Gibbs too. I played some Gibbs at 7K for the last couple, 2 weeks ago. And that felt, even then I was like, damn, like this still feels a little kind of thin-ish. He's now under Bijan, or over Bijan, I should say, over Ken Walker. I can't get there. Let's talk Ken Walker, actually. And I was going to say, man, this game should be way higher total if we were going to get DK, but womp womp. Metcalf is out. Didn't practice all week. We're going to go back to the Tyler Lockett and JSN show. Definitely just hurts this game environment. Metcalf was the one way besides Walker who can rip off a long run, obviously. But Metcalf is the ceiling for the Seahawks offense. Let's talk through it though. Puka banged his knee. It's the same knee he had. I have no idea what's going on there. If he's, obviously if he plays, we got to expect some sort of limitation like last week, 60% route share. He didn't practice today. He was limited on Thursday. It's definitely not a good sign for him. We'll just have to see on Sunday with that. Hopefully we'll get a Jay Glazer report at, 5 minutes before kickoff because this game's in the late window. So again, we'll just have to see. Hilo, what do you think, man? Walk me through this game.
Yeah, so it was interesting to me that both Puka Nacua and Cooper Kupp kind of played similar roles in the offense in their first game back from extended absences. 57, 58% snap rate, similarly like non-elite route participation rate. I would expect Cooper Kupp's role in the offense to grow this week, while I don't think we can say the same about Puka Nacua. So when you get Cooper Kupp as like the only established pass catcher in this offense, we've kind of seen what that can do for his upside. So I think Cooper Kupp is really interesting at his kind of price where it's probably 1K-ish too cheap. I don't expect a lot of the field to get here. He's priced at 7.7. It's an awkward pricing range. But if the offense is going to have success, it's probably almost exclusively running through Cooper Kupp and through running back, whatever the hell his name is. Kyron Williams. Yeah. Thanks. Long day. So
hey, it's late here now.
Yeah, dude. I think you can play either of them. You can play them together even in this spot against a Seahawks team that is near the top of the league in pass attempts per game and pass rate over expectation. And I think you can capture some upside that I don't think the field is going to be looking towards. If the report comes out, like if we get a Shefty bomb overnight tomorrow night, that's like, hey, Puka Nacua is not going to be limited. First, I'll say like, I don't believe you. But second, I'll be like, well, he might have a little bit of upside here. His price is only 7,200. He had a much higher targets per route run rate than Cooper Kupp did last week. So if his like participation does increase, he's entirely too cheap for his role.
Yeah, I kind of view Kupp as like Lamb Jr. on this slate, just in general. He's got 10 days in between games. This is the healthiest he's been since week 1. We were talking through projections this morning, Jake. I was looking through the route shares. Kupp had a 98% route share in week 1. And if we get back to that, he was at 79% last week. It's not too far. It's not too big of a stretch to say he could be back in the high 80s this week, especially given he's had 10 days off. So I really like Kupp this week. I was going to say, I just want to jam in Nakua on Wednesday for all this mess. But man, I like Kupp a lot. I think Ken Walker is one of the most interesting tournament plays of the week, though. Got sick week 7. Last week they got trucked against Buffalo. Route share was split. I think he gets back to the bell cow roll. What say you about Walker in Seattle here, Jake?
Yeah, I mean, I'm totally with you there. I think he's absolutely looking at a bell cow role this week against a Rams defense that's allowed the 10th most rushing yards per game. I mean, if we just sort of remove the last 2 games or just look at the first 3 quarters of last week, he was still at a 78% snap share, 57% route share. I mean, those are great numbers, especially for a running back as skilled as Walker. He's probably the only guy I'm interested in here on the Seattle side. It'll be interesting to see where the Geno Smith ownership ends up, because he was projecting as chalk when we thought DK Metcalf might play. At this point, I mean, even 5 or 6% for Geno feels way too high. And I did want to rip off a stat for Kupp, because I think he's a really great play this week. He's out targeted Nakua 18-13 in the 6 quarters both players have been on the field together. In less than 4 quarters without Nakua, Kupp has earned 17 targets. So yeah, I think CeeDee Lamb light is a really great call on how to view Kupp this week.
Yeah, and on that vein, I like Stafford. Just pair him with Stafford. You could play some Kyron and get all the touchdown upside, but I think Stafford with Walker and then Kupp is the way I'd game stack this game. I still like Jameis more, though. I'm just looking at Jameis at 5,400. I can't not click it, baby. I can't not click it. We're gonna have to run that back, guys. This has been awesome. Hour and 10 plus minutes here of the best DFS intel of the week. Stick around. Jake and Ryan will be live in 15-ish, 20-ish minutes, walking through the Underdog Battle Royale slate. They've been absolutely crushing over there. And tomorrow afternoon, our guy Scott will be live with Neil, as he always is, on Outside the Box. Our great friend Neil and Scott have crushed it this season. Make sure you listen to that tomorrow afternoon or tune in later in the day to get that show. Guys, this has been awesome. Good luck in week 9. See you at the top of the leaderboards.
What?
Why are you shaking your head?
You're welcome.